Who's ready to talk some football? I am. Now, this is a video I got the idea to do because Super Bowl Sunday is coming up, and Super Bowl Sunday for me is the greatest sporting event of the year. There are other sporting events I get super excited for, like March Madness, the World Series, the Stanley Cup, but there's something about the NFL's grand climax, its championship game, that really sets it apart from everything else that's out there. And I think it's because it is just one game. There's a lot of build-up to it, and it's built up to throughout the entire course of the season. But unlike the World Series or the Stanley Cup, it is just one game. You're not getting a full 7-game series to determine the champion. And that's exciting to me. It's like, all right, you've got one chance to take home immortality. And that makes it a lot more exciting to me. And it is just one night, so it feels like a big party. And it's almost like its own self-contained holiday. It's like, for me, it's like the Christmas of sporting events. And I look forward to it every year. And that's not to say that every game is good, because Lord knows there's been plenty of crappy Super Bowls. Last year's being probably the absolute worst that I've ever sat through. But it's when it's exciting, there's nothing better. And it makes the entire season worth of build up to this game worth it. You've been waiting all season for this moment, and now we're going to get to see it. And tomorrow, my best wishes and good luck. I wish it all to the Kansas City Chiefs and the San Francisco 49ers. They are the two teams that absolutely deserve to be there. The New England Patriots didn't make it, so I don't really have anybody to hate this time around, so I'm just kind of just waiting to enjoy the game. If you twisted my arm and asked me which team I was pulling for, I would have to say the Kansas City Chiefs, just because I would like to see Andy Reid get a ring and kind of get that monkey off of his back, because I always felt like Andy Reid. When he was with Philly, I couldn't say I liked him because he's a Philadelphia Eagles coach and I'm not supposed to like him, but I always quietly respected him. And I always, in the back of my mind, even if the Eagles won a Super Bowl with him, I would have felt like, yeah, but it's Andy Reid. And it's like, yeah, it makes sense. I think bad luck has been more the reason why he hasn't won a ring up to this point, more than any deficiencies in his coaching necessarily. So if he were to win tomorrow, I'd be really happy with that. And I like Patrick Mahomes as well, so I am kind of pulling for the Chiefs if I had to pick. But 49ers, I wouldn't have a problem with them winning, especially with Jimmy G, who I kind of like. And I love that they won the championship game just by running the ball, basically. I was like, that's great. That's some classic old school football. That's adorable. It's great and it's wonderful. So really, again, I don't have anybody to root against. I'm just hoping we get a good game this year to make up for the disaster that was last year's game. And so that's my take on tomorrow's game. I hope it's a good game, and I hope to have a lot of fun, and I hope it's an enjoyable one. But what I wanted to talk about in this video was my favorite Super Bowl of all time. Because as I mentioned, the Super Bowl is kind of like the Christmas of sporting events to me, and there's been a lot of great memories over the years. I was actually just talking with somebody the other day about how the tackle from Super Bowl 34 was my all-time favorite defensive play in Super Bowl history. I think it's one of the all-time great moments, one of the all-time great highlights. Again, a favorite defensive play. I think the fact that it got the name The Tackle is perfect, because, a lot of plays have gotten that, like, simple kind of name to it, like The Catch and that type of stuff. But I think this play really lives up to its name more, like, lives up to its simple name more than the other ones does, because it's, game on the line. Is it going to go to overtime, or are the Rams going to win it on this play? And he just fell short, completed the catch and just fell short by like this much, and just couldn't break the plane, even though he did everything he could to break the plane. And so the tackle that secured the Super Bowl win for the, at the time, the St. Louis Rams. So that's like my favorite defensive play in Super Bowl history. But when I look back on all the great games that have been played in the Super Bowl, I really think that, and this is where my team bias is going to come into play, my favorite ones are obviously going to be the ones that were won by the New York Giants, because they are my team, so I have a lot more investment in those games. And when they win the Super Bowl, it's like this amazing euphoric high that can't be duplicated. And actually, the earliest Super Bowl memory I have is watching the game between Buffalo and New York with the famous wide right ending. And it was so exciting to see the Giants win a Super Bowl at that young of an age. And at the time, I was like, oh, this is going to happen all the time. No, it didn't. No, it did not. And we actually had a Super Bowl in the early 2000s, actually the year after Rams and Titans tore it down with the tackle. We get one of the worst Super Bowls ever as the Ravens basically demolished the Giants from start to finish. I actually remember specifically, it's the only time I ever turned a Super Bowl off. And when you look at how bad some Super Bowls have gotten, this is the only time I turned it off. And it was when the Giants ran back a kickoff for a touchdown, their first points of the game, only points of the game. And I was like, okay, maybe we're going to get back in it now. And then immediately the Ravens ran their kickoff back for a touchdown, so I just said fuck it and turned the TV off because I knew how the rest of this game was going to go. And I was really bitter about that game for a while, but I got over it because somebody sat me down and talked to me. It was like, look, Patrick, you did lose to arguably the greatest defense in the history of the NFL, so do you really feel that bad about it? And I was like, okay, that makes sense. But, it never feels good to lose a Super Bowl. You want your team to get there, but you also want them to win. And if they don't win, it is a horrible feeling. And that night, I got my taste of it. And, I can't imagine how Buffalo fans feel, but that's a whole other story. But it's, like I said, your favorite Super Bowls are largely going to be the ones that are won by your team. And it's, if you're a fan of the Detroit Lions or the Cleveland Browns or the Jacksonville Jaguars or the Houston Texans or the Minnesota Vikings or the Buffalo Bills or any team that's either made it and never won or never made it at all, it doesn't feel good. And I'm sorry that, your team never won a Super Bowl. But it's, I have been blessed, fortunately, as a New York Giants fan. And my team has won 4 Super Bowls, been to 5. I'd say that's pretty damn good. I'm happy with those numbers. I'm happy with that. In the Eli Manning, Tom Coughlin era, we went from being a team that won 2 Super Bowls, which is good. I'll take, it's better than none. But we weren't up into like the epic, multi-time Super Bowl winning franchises like the Dallas Cowboys, San Francisco 49ers, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and what the New England Patriots have become, tying for the most at 6. And in the Eli Manning, Tom Coughlin era, we actually did become one of the more closer to the top tier Super Bowl winning franchises, where the teams I just named are the only ones ahead of us now. And we're tied with the Green Bay Packers, I believe, and I don't think anybody else. I could be wrong on that, but we went from being a kind of like, oh, that's cute, they won 2, isn't that cool, to being, oh wow, they've won they've won 4. That's pretty awesome. So I'm very happy with that. And as a fan, I feel blessed. Just having, just to have 1 Super Bowl win is a really big deal. So to have 4, that's pretty impressive. And I can't say that my team has done me wrong in that regard. We're undefeated in NFC Championship games and we've won 4 Super Bowls. So I'm super, super happy with that. So of those 4, which one is my favorite Super Bowl of all time? Well, the Buffalo Bills and the Giants in 1991, Super Bowl 25. That's a big one, and I think it's one of the best Super Bowls of all time. But if I had to pick a favorite, it's got to be Super Bowl 42. Now I could go with the other one. Super Bowl 46 was an awesome sequel to 42. And our first Super Bowl win was must have been a cathartic one for the New York fan base because it was our first championship in 30 years, first one of the Super Bowl era, and it was also won by. It's the best as far as like dominance and talent goes. It's the best Giants team of all time because we just. Had a 14-2 record. The 2 losses came early in the season. Everything clicked, and we just dominated every team we went up against and stormed through the playoffs and won the Super Bowl. We didn't have the lead the entire game, but in the second half, we pretty much took control of the game and dominated. So, and Phil Simms had one of the best performances by a quarterback in the history of the Super Bowl. So, it would be nice. It would be lovely to have a season like that again, where we just storm through everybody and win the Super Bowl easily. I would kill to have that again. So I think all of the Giants Super Bowl wins have special things attached to it and have special memories. Not so much the first one because I was I don't even think I was a year old when that game happened, now that I think about it. I'd have to look at the age. I don't think I was even a year old, so obviously I don't remember watching it. I've seen the game since, but I don't have special memories attached to it. But when you look at all the Giants Super Bowl wins, I think the only one that has to stand out as the best is Super Bowl 42. I think it's my favorite Super Bowl of all time, and again, that comes with a lot of bias. And I'm also going to say that it's the greatest win in Giants history, for sure. And I remember a friend of mine called me a few days after that game when it happened, not only to congratulate me, but he also told me, it's like, dude, that may have been the greatest season in the history of football. When you look at how everything fell into place and how everything played out, all the storylines and everything, it just worked out so perfect. It was almost like something out of a movie. And I should start off by saying that this jersey right here that I'm wearing, 92, this is the jersey. I've had this since Christmas of 2006. And this jersey I was wearing the night the Giants won Super Bowl 42, and I've had it ever since. And there's no chance. Like, this thing, and it's in pretty good condition, actually, but this thing could be falling apart and could be rags, and I'm still not going to throw it out, because it was like, I was wearing it the night that the Giants won the Super Bowl, and Michael Strahan got a sack in the Super Bowl, and so many great things happened that night. It was of all the nights I've had, not just as a Giants fan, but as a football fan, it is my favorite night in the history of being a football fan. It was just, it was the ultimate underdog story come to fruition that played out right in front of my very eyes. So when you look at this season, and like I said, all the storylines and everything that played out, it was done to perfection. On one side, you had the New England Patriots, the perfect unbeaten team, who were seeking to do what no other team had done before, go 19-0 and win a Super Bowl. That had never happened. The undefeated Dolphins team from the 70s, it was a 14-game season back then, so they only went 17-0. So you could argue that the Patriots actually ended up surpassing them by going 18-0. So they just didn't finish it off with the Super Bowl, but it's... the Patriots were seeking to do something that had never been done before, and it looked like they were going to do it. Throughout the entire season, they dominated almost everybody. And I have specific memories of a lot of the games that they played. I remember when they put up over 50 points against the Redskins and just humiliated them from start to finish. I remember when they played the Miami Dolphins, I think it was, and it was like 45-0 by halftime. And it was ridiculous, the numbers that they were putting up with Tom Brady at quarterback, Randy Moss as the lead receiver. They looked unstoppable. And the only teams that put up a fight were the Indianapolis Colts, which that was part of the Peyton-Brady rivalry. That was another chapter in that storied history, and that game was close, but the Patriots won. The Eagles put up a really good fight against them, but the Patriots still won. The Ravens basically beat them, but the Patriots beat them on a technicality almost, where it's like they stopped them on fourth down at the end to secure the win, but then it was revealed that one of the Ravens coaches or something called a timeout, so the play got negated. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? What the fuck? And Ray Lewis, the funniest thing about that whole game was that Ray Lewis was super pissed. And it was one of the weirdest games I've ever watched, because every time it looked like the Ravens stopped them, a flag would happen, or the timeout got called, or something would happen that would just keep the drive alive. And when the Patriots took the lead at the very end, the referee threw a flag at Ray Lewis, and Ray Lewis picked up the flag and threw it into the crowd because he was just so fucking frustrated. It's like, I've never seen that before. It was wild. It was just wild. And that game kind of kickstarted a lot of the bad feelings between the Ravens and the Patriots. And ever since that game, it feels like whenever they play each other, there's a lot of bad feelings and a lot of sourness there. And they've had a few more other crazy games since then, but that game was just exceptionally crazy. And so you had all of that going on, and on the other side of the coin, to further build up on the Patriots, they also had the Spygate controversy. So at the beginning of the season, they're accused of cheating. And so you got this unbeatable team that is racking up all these numbers, breaking all these records, and at the start of the season, they get accused of cheating. and they basically, I think they ended up losing a draft pick, like a first-round draft pick because of it. The whole Spygate controversy. And so everybody, like America, just rallied against the Patriots. It's like, all right, fuck them. And, keep in mind, Tom Brady and Bill Belichick had already won 3 Super Bowls up to this point. So it's just like, they've won 3 Super Bowls. They get caught cheating, and now they're going for an undefeated season. Fuck them. So America was just rallying against the Patriots. So on one hand, it's like you had your villains, basically. They were the ultimate villains, although I'm sure New England Patriots fans and the team itself didn't see itself as villains. They just saw it as like, oh, we're against the world, so we've got the chip on our shoulder and all this other stuff. And that was a very interesting storyline to see play out throughout the season. I'm like, are they really going to do this? And I remember sitting there. I hated them too. This is where I really started to grow to hate them. It's like, I don't want them to get an undefeated season. I really don't want them to get an undefeated season. So on the few occasions where it came close to them losing, I was like, oh, come on. I was like, when you get to a point where I'm rooting for the Eagles to beat a team, it's getting pretty bad. And actually, I rooted for the Eagles when they won the Super Bowl a couple years ago. So again, when I'm rooting for the Eagles, it's bad. But anyway, you had all of that going on. And then on the other side, you had the New York Giants, who I think, when I watch documentaries about this Super Bowl and about this season, I think some people over-exaggerate how bad the Giants were at this point. I remember seeing one. It was one of the NFL Network's top 10 videos where they talked about the greatest upsets in NFL history, and they talked about the Giants. It's like, oh, the Patriots were like the perfect team of the season, but the Giants were one of the most disappointing. And I'm like, I don't agree with that. I think the Giants were 10-6, which is not stellar, but it's playoff caliber for sure. And they played well most of the time. And if you look at the 6 games that they lost one game that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. We'll get there when we get there. They lost twice to the Dallas Cowboys, which never feels good because I hate the Cowboys. But the Cowboys ended up being the number 1 seed of the NFC, so they lost to a team that was expected to beat them. Then they lost to the Green Bay Packers, who ended up being the number 2 seed in the NFC. And they lost 1 game to the Redskins, which was a bad weather game. And the Redskins were riding kind of a high because I believe that was the Sean Taylor season where Sean Taylor passed away. And they were playing exceptionally hard to try and honor Sean Taylor's memory because they made the playoffs that year. People forget that, Anyway, so they lost 1 game to the Redskins, which again, bad weather game. And Redskins actually weren't bad that year. And they also lost to the Minnesota Vikings, which was the Giants' biggest disaster that season, where Eli threw like three pick sixes, and that game was terrible. And that game was like just everything that could have gone wrong went wrong in that game. And it happens sometimes, even the best teams like the Chicago Bears, they have that game in Miami. It happens. So, of the 6 games that they lost, I would say there were 4 of them that they were absolutely expected to lose. And the other 2, like the Redskins game has I don't want to say excuses, but it's understandable that they could lose that game. And the one that, and even the Vikings is I'm not saying the Vikings shouldn't have lost to the Vikings. It's more like they shouldn't have let the Vikings beat them that badly. That was the one game I look back on where it was like, ooh, that one didn't look too good. But generally, for the rest of the season, they played fairly well. Bunch of nail biters. They started 0-2, again, starting off against Dallas and Green Bay, who were expected to beat them. And Eli, people forget this, but Eli got hurt in the second game in Green Bay. And I believe he played hurt for at least a good portion of the season, but he didn't sit out for it, which was one of those moments that I gained a lot of respect for Eli Manning as a quarterback. And this was also this first season after Tiki Barber left, and Tiki said some things about Eli's leadership and questioned his leadership capabilities and everything. And Eli fought back a little bit against him, which you never really see that from Eli. So that was actually good to see, that he was willing to stand up for himself. So I think the big story of the Giants this season was Eli Manning's coming of age. Because, and it's appropriate to talk about this now, given that Eli has now announced his retirement. And as I said, I alluded to it earlier, the Eli Manning, Tom Coughlin era took us from being a franchise that only won 2 Super Bowls and made us one of the most winningest franchises of the Super Bowl era. And I think Eli deserves a lot of credit for that. And this season in particular, and of course the 46th season in 2011. But I think this was the season where Eli really started to come into his own, because this was the season where the Giants started to win like a lot of nail-biter close games. And it's so funny when I look back on this season, there's seasons come and go all the time, and even the 2011 season, I don't have vivid memories of a lot of the games that were played that season, but this season in particular, I remember a lot of these games like they happened yesterday. I remember the first game in London where we beat the Miami Dolphins. I remember that the nasty field conditions of that game. That was a train wreck. Slop bowl is how I always describe that game, where Eli actually scored a rushing touchdown. I remember the Battle of New York against the Jets, where Plaxico Burress, who played hurt most of the season, had that stiff arm to run in for a touchdown. I remember the Monday night game in Atlanta, where we pretty much handily defeated Atlanta. I remember the two games against Eagles, were one of the rare times where we swept the Eagles throughout the season, which felt good, where our defense sacked McNabb 12 times. It was Osi Umenyiora got 6 of those sacks. It was absolutely ridiculous. And the second game was a lot closer, and we actually won it on a missed field goal at the tail end. There's a lot of, again, it was a lot of nail-biters. A lot of nail-biters that season. But through it all, the Giants were able to put the pieces together to be able to succeed and win in those tight situations. And actually, if you look back at the undefeated Dolphins, a lot of those games were close. And some would say that that's like, oh, they're lucky. I look back on it more as like they're really good at situational football, and they know how to win in those tight situations. That's how I look at it anyway. But that's how I've always viewed it. But the game in Chicago, I remember that one. And the two other aspects of this team that really stand out to me, one is the Road Warriors concept, because we had to win a lot of games on the road, which is sad because a lot of our worst games this season were actually at home, but they became the Road Warriors because they were almost undefeated on the road. The only road game we lost the entire season was the first game of the season in Dallas. Other than that, they won all their road games. And how many rookies that really came through for us, especially in the playoffs. And it felt like every other week some player was stepping up, and I was like, who the fuck is that guy? I remember Ahmad Bradshaw's coming out party, which was the game in Buffalo where we secured our wild card spot in that game. Bad weather game, this really weird game where all the points were scored going into one end zone, which was really strange to see. And by the end of the game, the Giants just took control of it, and Ahmad Bradshaw had the longest run of the season, and basically ran us into the playoffs. And a lot of good memories from this season, and a lot of those games, some of them were nail-biters, some of them were close. I'm sure a lot of Giants fans had heart attacks along the way, but a lot of fun, close games with a defense that struggled early on, but then clicked and played exceptionally well and got a lot of pressure on the quarterback. Again, when you had Michael Strahan playing his final season, and Osi Umenyiora and Justin Tuck all coming into their own, and the secondary with Sam Madison and Corey Webster, who was benched early on, and then in the playoffs really started to shine and became one of our big heroes in the playoffs. Aaron Ross's rookie year was really good. So I have a lot of fond memories of that season and watching all those games week to week, even though they drove me crazy. And again, the development of Eli Manning, where he would have that bad interception, but the thing about Eli is that he could play poorly for the first half, and you still wouldn't feel like you were out of the game. Like, he could come back and win it in the second half and in the fourth quarter especially. And that was always the kind of the personality of Eli's career. Wasn't always pretty. Wasn't always glorious. We didn't always dominate. But you always felt like you had a shot as long as the ball was in Eli Manning's hand. And that's something I'll always remember and always appreciate about his play. He was so good at not letting the bad plays affect him for the rest of the game. Where, I mean, you look at a game like that one Super Bowl where it was Seahawks and Denver Broncos, and I'm not trying to say anything about Peyton when I say this. I love Peyton Manning. But I've never seen a Super Bowl end on the first play before, where once that snap soared over Peyton's head, it felt like the game was over. Like, they just never got on track again. But Eli, it just never... he was always so cool, calm, and collected that you always felt like he could come back and win it. And this was the season. Actually, I would even argue last season, the season before this, where we were much worse. We were 8-8, bumblefucked our way into the playoffs. But that was where you started to see signs of like Eli's ability to come back. Like I remember that game in Philly, especially where we were down like I think it was 17 points, and we came back and won it in overtime. So. That was always the personality of Eli Manning's career to me. He didn't always play well, but you never felt like things were out of hand as long as the ball was in his hands. And that's something I always appreciated about Eli. So, with all of that said, we clinched the playoffs by week 16, which again is another indicator. It's like, this whole like, oh, the Giants aren't that good. And I'm like, we clinched the playoffs in week 16 in a competitive division, mind you. Like I already mentioned, Dallas Cowboys were the number 1 seed at 13-3. So, I mean, they were going to win the number 1 spot regardless. But if you look at the rest of the teams, Giants were 10-6. The Redskins were 9-7. And the Redskins got the other wild card spot. And the Eagles, who were the worst team of the year, were 8-8. And I remember one of the experts correctly, I would agree, at the time saying it's like, I think the Eagles are like the best 8-8 team I've ever seen, because they were actually a good team, because this was right in the middle of the Andy Reid, Donovan McNabb era, where they would always get close and get to the championship game and fold, or get to the Super Bowl and fold, but they were typically a really good team. And I think that season they just they lost a lot of close games, and it wasn't like they were terrible. It was just I don't want to call it bad luck. It was just they struggled, and they were the weakest team of that division. I think the competition in the NFC East that year was very, very tight. And the fact that 2 of the teams got the wild card spots, I think speaks volumes about how fierce the competition was in that division. So to be 10-6 in that division with the number 1 seed of the NFC at the top of the division, I'd say that's pretty good. I'd say the Giants did pretty well that season. So anyway, we clinched the playoff spot in week 16 against Buffalo. And then week 17 comes up, and this was the whole turning point of the season, I think. We faced the New England Patriots, week 17, their undefeated regular season on the line, and the Giants have already clinched the playoffs. So, and when I look back on that game, one of the things that really upset me was how the experts kept telling the Giants to just lay down, rest your starters, and just basically just let the Patriots win. Because the media was really like, they really wanted, and it really felt like they wanted that perfect season. And I've seen, if you've seen any of the NFL films, like documentaries about the season and the mic'd ups and things like that, Michael Strahan talked about it in his pregame, warming up the defense. He was saying stuff like, okay, so the Giants are in the playoffs, rest their starters so nobody gets hurt, and blah, 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 and all this other stuff. And then Michael brings up, it's like, they're in the playoffs too. No one's telling them to rest. And I felt the exact same way. And it's like, wait, so they want to go for perfection. They want to go for immortality. And the Giants are just supposed to lay down and let them have it. Fuck that. Play them. And I was like, you know what? Everyone's doubting them. Nobody thinks the Giants are going to get far into the playoffs. I say treat this like the playoffs and just go all in and see what you can do and see how well you do. Because if you're going to the playoffs, your goal is to win the Super Bowl. Regardless if you're a wild card team or a number 1 seed or what. I mean, the Tennessee Titans this year, who I thought did exceptionally well in the playoffs and surpassed anyone's expectations, beating the Patriots, beating the Ravens, who I thought for sure were going to make it to the Super Bowl this year. Nobody thought they'd get that far, but they played like they felt like they could. And I give all respect to the Tennessee Titans for the effort that they put forth in this playoffs when no one believed that they could make it that far. I think they deserve a ton of credit for that. So, yeah, but if you make it to the playoffs, your goal is Super Bowl. And everybody at that point, it's 0-0 anyway, so just go for it. And I think at this point, it's like, what's the point of, halting your momentum? It's like, go for it. You're going to be playing the Patriots in the Super Bowl most likely if you make it to the Super Bowl. Go for it and see how you measure up against them. And this was, of all the games that the Patriots played through 17 weeks of the regular season, this was the one where it was like, is it going to happen? Are they going to get beat by the Giants? And the Giants played him hard. They played him really, really hard. Now, a lot of people took the attitude of, oh, wow, the Giants played really impressively well. They should be proud of their effort here. But I look back on this game with a tiny bit of regret because I really felt like the Giants should have won this game. And I'm not trying to accuse the referees of boning us or anything like that, or, oh, the Patriots were lucky. I'm not saying that at all. The Patriots were a great team, and it required a lot of work on our part to just make it competitive. But what I mean is we had a 12-point lead going into the fourth quarter, and I was like, man, I really felt like the Giants kind of let us slip through their fingers. They really could have, should have won that game. And I look back on that game. I remember the night it happened. I was like, you had it, Giants. I felt like you could have beat them. And I kind of, in the back of my mind, I really wanted to get another crack at them. Not knowing how the playoffs were going to play out, not knowing how the Giants were going to do in the playoffs. But I was kind of like, I really want them to face the Patriots again because I really feel like they could have beat them in this game. So you get to the playoffs, and once again, everyone's doubting the Giants. Everyone is second-guessing them and saying, oh, they shouldn't have played everybody in Week 17, and oh, they should have done that, and they're going to lose. They're going to be a one-and-done team, and you're going to forget all about them. And our first game was in Tampa against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I looked at that game, and all the experts picked Tampa to win that game. And I looked at that, and again, maybe this is my Giants fandom coming out, and I've already alluded to it where I feel like people exaggerated how bad the Giants were that season and how they just kind of like lucked their way into the playoffs, which I don't think is true at all. I looked at that game, and I was like, we can beat Tampa. We're better than them. Tampa Bay won their division at 9-7. And they're not that good. I watched Tampa Bay play that year. I was like, I really don't think they're that good. And yet everybody picked Tampa over us. I'm like, oh God, Giants, please win this game. I was like, because this is like, come on. I mean, we are a better team than them. And sure enough, the Giants, we had a rocky first quarter and then came back and won it. It was a hot weather game. Warm weather, and which is an indicator of how these playoffs were going to go as weather-wise. But, super hot and played in Florida. But once Eli and the offense got going, they played really well. No turnovers. Defense played really well. Kept Garcia and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in check. And Rondé Barber, who's Tiki's brother and ran his mouth against Eli, got made a fool out of at several points in that game, which was good to see. Giants pretty much stormed through that game. I think what was the final score? It was like 24-14, which doesn't look that dominant, but it's like the Buccaneers got a pity touchdown at the end. We pretty much dominated that game. And this was where Corey Webster and guys like R.W. McQuarters started to become a playoff hero at this point. He had an interception in every game in the playoffs, except for the Super Bowl. So this is where like a lot of those rookies and a lot of those old vets started to come through and really, because that's the other aspect of this team. It's not only had a bunch of rookies like the Kevin Bosses and the Steve Smiths and Ahmad Bradshaws and Jay Alford, who I'll talk about when I get to the Super Bowl, and all these guys that really started to step up, Aaron Ross, but you also had these veterans like the Michael Strahans and Amani Toomer, who's my favorite receiver in Giants history. I love Amani Toomer, and it was nice to see him get rewarded this season. But we also had Jeff Eagles, our punter, who, as it turns out, was like the best punter in Giants history. Because, oh boy, did we feel that loss when we got Matt Dodge a couple years after this. Jesus Christ. But so you had this nice blending of like the young talents and the old talents, and just kind of patchworking together something special that really started to take shape in the playoffs. You had Tom Coughlin as a coach who I always respected, especially when you look at his work in Jacksonville, where he took an expansion team to the AFC Championship game. That is insane. That is absolutely insane that he was able to take an early year expansion team to the AFC Championship game. It's like that's probably the greatest indicator of Tom Coughlin's ability as a coach right there. And we also had our defensive coordinator, Steve Spagnuolo, who was the mastermind behind our great defense that shaped and developed and grew and evolved throughout the season and really came through in the playoffs. So we had that first win in Tampa. which was great. It was nice to get Eli. Okay, Eli got his first playoff win. Giants won a playoff game, so all the talk is like, oh, the Giants suck. It's like, okay, all that's been put to rest, thank God. But then the next week we're going up against Dallas, who are coming off of their big bye week. And all the stuff started to come out that they took the vacation in Mexico, and Tony Romo was dating Jessica Simpson at the time, and they had fun in Mexico. And it had come out that Jerry Jones had given all the players tickets to the NFC Championship game. And it was like, oh, so this is just a formality. Like, they don't have to play the Giants that hard. It's just expected that they're going to win this game because they swept them in the regular season. It was like, all right, let's look at the regular season games. The second time they played, the Giants lost by, I believe, 11 points. And the Giants had 2 touchdowns called back due to penalties. And I'm not saying those were bad calls. I'm just saying Giants made mistakes that kind of cost them that game. And that's part of the game. It happens. Like, if you don't execute, you're going to lose. And so to me, that's not like, I'm not saying that Dallas didn't deserve to win that game. I'm just saying the Giants shot themselves in the foot. It's like, if you execute and you don't fuck up, things will go better for you. More on that in just a second. And the first game they played, actually, I think I may have been wrong. I said Eli got hurt in Green Bay. I think he got hurt in the first game towards the end, because I remember they took him out towards the end of the first game. But so he got hurt in Dallas. And the Cowboys were the better team there, but it wasn't like a disastrous game, I would say. It was just kind of like, okay, the Cowboys are the better team, and that's just how it played out pretty much. Probably how they probably would have expected this game to play out, but I think those 2 early wins, those 2 wins in the season, and I think those, the fact that they were the number 1 seed and it was like preordained that it was going to be Cowboys and Patriots in the Super Bowl and all this other stuff, they kind of fell asleep at the wheel a little bit, and you have this Giants team that was getting hungry and was gaining momentum and was getting better, and they go into Dallas Stadium for this game, and it looked like the Cowboys were going to take control of the game. These 2 punishing drives, that were really long, like 9-10 minute drives, with Marion Barber kind of leading the way at running back, and kind of took the game away from us. But Eli answered with these 2 really quick touchdowns, so you go into halftime with a tie game, and it was like, what the fuck? It's a tie game. That's unexpected, and we also got a big penalty at the end that really helped set up our tying score, and it's like, okay, game on. And then first drive of the second half, the defense holds them to a field goal, and those are the last points that Dallas scored for the rest of the game. Our defense started to click. I think what happened is, because I think they ran Marion Barber too much, I think Barber got tired. And he wasn't as effective in the second half. And so I think that was part of the problem with Dallas. But they also had execution problems. There's that now famous moment where Patrick Creighton, who ran his mouth throughout the week, Patrick Creighton dropped an easy pass that probably could have been a touchdown if he had found the room to run and gotten away from the defenders. But he dropped the pass. And that's kind of what I'm talking about here. It's like, well, yeah, you can talk about, oh, the Cowboys shot themselves in the foot, and oh, they got penalized here, and oh, Creighton dropped that pass, and blah, blah, blah. All this other stuff is like, gotta execute. That's how the game is played. You gotta execute. And the Cowboys did not execute that night when they needed to. And it was so funny watching them throughout that game, because you felt like when they fucked up, like T.O., who had a couple drop passes in that game, he would smile. And Tony Romo would be like, oh, shucks, and all this other stuff. You almost felt like they were going to win that game. So any mistake they made wasn't a big deal. Up until the fourth quarter when the Giants took the lead. And I'll always remember Brandon Jacobs getting the scoring run and then taking the football and just hucking it right into the Cowboys play clock and breaking one of the bulbs on the play clock. I was like, oh my God. We're causing property damage here in Dallas. But as the clock was winding down in the fourth quarter, you could sense the Cowboys were getting desperate. And the defense started to get more and more pressure on Romo, and they started getting sacks, and the Cowboys started making mistakes, and Romo started yelling at the referee and his players and everything. You could sense, I think it started to sink in. It's like, oh my God, we might not win this game. We gotta make something happen. We gotta make magic happen. And to their credit, the Cowboys got close. It was a huge nail biter there at the end. Especially when Romo had that like Brett Favre like play where he just slung the ball to Jason Witten and got a first down, and I was like, oh my god, here we go. And but you get down to the end, and it's like they're not in the red zone, but they're in close enough to where they can start taking shots into the end zone. And I was just sitting there like, please let something happen. Please let something happen. Don't let it end like this. And then it's 4th and 11. Romo gets the pass, gets the ball, throws it up the middle, and R.W. McQuarters comes up with the interception, securing the win for the New York Giants. And the look on Jerry Jones's face on the sideline was like the greatest thing I could ever have. I was like, as happy as the Giants team looked on their sideline and as ecstatic as I was, the look on Jerry Jones's face when the Giants won that game was like the stuff that, it was like a Christmas miracle. It was just everything I could have hoped. And it kept getting better when I saw the postgame where Michael Strahan went up there. It's like, because T.O. had talked all week about, get your popcorn ready. Then Michael Strahan goes up for the postgame and goes like, well, maybe Creighton and T.O. can get their popcorn ready and watch us next week or something. It's like, oh shit. And then T.O., the game where we made T.O. fucking cry. It was wonderful. And it was the best. It was just the best feeling in the world to go into Dallas when nobody believed that we could ever win and beat them at the very end after they swept us in the regular season. And I remember after I stopped screaming because of how happy I was, I turned to I watched it with my family and I was like, I don't give a fuck what happens after this. We could lose next week by 50 points. The fact that we crushed Dallas is the best thing that could happen to us this season. More on that later, but that's, of all the non-Super Bowl wins in Giants history, that one is my personal favorite. The fact that we not only beat Dallas, but completely dashed their hopes of another Super Bowl that year, where they were supposed to make it to the Super Bowl that year. It's like everybody was saying the Patriots going to win everything, but it was going to be Dallas and New England in the Super Bowl, and that didn't happen. And I was like, yes! We did it, boys! We ruined it for them! It was great! That was wonderful to sit through that night. And then we get to the NFC Championship game, building off the whole weather thing. We had a hot weather game in Tampa, and then we go on the road, and we go into what I believe was the third coldest game in NFL history. If you don't believe me, look at Tom Coughlin's face during that game. He was like as red as a goddamn cherry. It was ridiculous. But it was a really cold game, bad weather game. Giants played well and played Brett Favre and the Packers. Turned out to be Brett Favre's last game as a Packer in Lambeau Field, where nobody wins playoff games in Lambeau Field but the Packers. That's always how it's been. To go into that one and play him really hard and play really well was great. And there's a lot of moments in that game that I'll always remember. One defensive one that really sticks out to me was Antonio Pierce's almost double tackle where he fought through a block to stop the receiver from getting a first down and helped stall the drive. And it's like, dude, that was huge because there was no one behind him. It's like that could have been a touchdown, and which would have been huge in this game. Plaxico Burress came up with probably his best performance of the season, and but the real memorable part of all of it was Lawrence Tynes, who missed 2 game-winning field goals at the very end. It was like, oh shit, this is, and of course immediately I'm having flashbacks to the Jay Feely Seahawks game where he missed 3 game-winning field goals of a game we should have won and we ended up losing. I was like, oh no, please not another one of these. And it's overtime. Brett Favre takes the ball, and you're thinking, okay, here comes that Brett Favre magic. He's going to march him down the field, and it's going to be Favre versus Brady in the Super Bowl. Corey Webster catches an interception, runs it back a little bit. We get into field goal range, and here comes Lawrence Tynes. And as has become known in Giants lore, it was third time's a charm. He missed the longest field goal, because actually the first 2 he missed were shorter, and then he hit the longer one. It's like, is there anything that sums up the Giants season better than that? We can't win it easy on the easy field goals. We got to make it hard on ourselves and win with the longer field goal in overtime. And to go in there, win the NFC Championship in Lambeau Field, basically retire Brett Favre as a Packer. That was awesome. And I have no ill will towards Green Bay or Brett Favre or anything like that. It was just like, wow, we beat them in Lambeau. How great is that? And I could barely process it. I was like, oh my God, the Giants are going to the Super Bowl. This is insane. Nobody ever predicted that the Giants were going to get this far. And once again, the experts were going against them every single game along the way. They picked Dallas over us. They picked Green Bay over us. And we keep winning on the road. And I'm like, well, there's that rematch with New England I wanted. Damn. And New England, by the way, in their playoff run, they beat Jacksonville pretty handily. Not like, didn't dominate necessarily, but it was never in question that New England was going to lose or that they were going to win. But then they played the AFC Championship game. And I was like, all right, Phil Rivers went into that game with a torn ACL. LaDainian Tomlinson went in with an injury. And LT actually had to be pulled from the game. And, with all that in their favor, the Patriots didn't look that good. People forget, Brady threw 3 picks in that game. I'm like, they don't look like the unbeatable Patriots in this game. Maybe they're just coasting. I don't know. But they didn't look as dominant in the AFC Championship game as I would have expected that team to look. And I'm not saying that gave me any kind of hope for the Super Bowl. I just felt like they don't look unbeatable. You know, it's like they don't look unbeatable. I think the Chargers, Phil Rivers is healthy. They probably could have won that game. Who knows? We'll never know. Which that would have been a hell of a Super Bowl. Phil Rivers and the Chargers versus Eli Manning and the Giants. Jesus, that storyline writes itself right there. But it's anyway, we get to the Super Bowl. And I remember the morning of, I was getting so mad at the coverage because it was like they were making fun of the Giants. And it's like, oh, the Patriots have 11 Pro Bowlers and the Giants only have 1 and all this other stuff. And they were like making fun of them. And I'm like, guys, they just went on the road, beat Tampa Bay, beat Dallas, beat Green Bay. They were 10-6. For God's sake, can we give them some respect for what they've done? And it felt like the overall attitude was like the Giants were just there to lose and they were just a footnote in New England's history. And I remember I got so mad, I stormed out of the house and I went to the movies. I went to go see the 2008 Rambo film, which I loved. It was perfect for the mood I was in because it allowed me to kind of like feel cathartic about Rambo, like liquefying bad guys with guns. And it was like, yeah, that reflects the type of mood I'm in right now. But I'm just really seething and angry because it's like my team's in the Super Bowl and I can't even enjoy it. And anyway, so we get to the game. And up to this point, I was like, look, I'm not going to say that I honestly thought the Giants were going to win this game. I would be lying if I said I did. What I wanted, though, I was like, look, I want them to make the Patriots fight for this. If they want to go 19-0, make them fight for it. And I also wanted, it's like, look, all I need, they were 12-point underdogs, I think. And I was like, all right, if they can beat the spread, like say they only lose by 10 or they only lose by like 7 or something like that, I can live with that. And I was like, you know what, I would just make it competitive and make them fight for it like they did in week 17. And I will be content with how the season turned out. That's all I want. So anyway, we get to the game, and there's and again, to highlight like the differences between these two teams, a Patriots game this season was march up and down the field, score points, and basically humiliate the other team. It was like Madden. It was just that level of ridiculous. A Giants game was keep it close. Offense is going to struggle a little bit for first 2 quarters, maybe 3 quarters, but keep it close. The defense will keep you in the game, and then in fourth quarter, we're going to explode and take control of the game. And I remember it was around halftime. The defense was starting to play well after allowing an early touchdown from the Patriots. And the offense opened up with this really good drive that took up 10 minutes of the clock, because I was like, that's one way we're going to beat them, is if we just hold on to the ball as long as possible. And opening up with a 10-minute drive was really good, but we only got 3 points out of it, unfortunately. So it's 7-3 for most of it up until the fourth quarter. And in the second quarter, I started to notice, wow, the defense is getting some good pressure on Brady. I like this, which was rare throughout the regular season. And the only teams that got like really good pressure on Brady were the Ravens and the Eagles, who had good defenses and defensive minds. And it's like, and they kept those games close. So it's like, if you're going to win this game, you are going to have to get to Tom Brady. And speaking of Tom, hi Tom. One thing I will always cherish about this season is in the media week leading up to the game, where one of the interviewers asked Plaxico if he had any predictions for the game, and he said 23-17, and that's what Plaxico said. And Brady was asked about that during the media day stuff, and he was like, 23-17, we're only going to score 17 points? Okay. And I was like, oh, you're that confident. Okay. All right. And apparently the defensive players for the Giants heard that. They were like, all right, we'll show you. And they held the greatest offense of all time to only 7 points in the first half. And going into halftime, it was like, all right, 3-7. Offense not great, but I was kind of like, this is looking more like a Giants game than it is a Patriots game. And we had the halftime show, which I have to talk about because it was Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. And this was during that period after the wardrobe malfunction incident that we'll just leave it at that, where all the Super Bowl halftime shows we got for a while was like cool old people like Paul McCartney and Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. I was like, this is cool. And my sister, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers is her favorite band. So when they got the halftime show, it's like, that's a sign. The Giants are going to win. That's a sign. It's my favorite team winning the Super Bowl with my favorite band in the halftime show. And it's like, that's a very odd way to analyze sports, Kathy, but I can't argue with it because she was right. But anyway, so that was a weird, like, karmic, kind of cosmic thing that took place. But anyway, we get into the second half. The defense is getting mad pressure on Brady, but the offense is still struggling. I remember my favorite sack of the game was Michael Strahan getting that big sack on Brady. I went nuts when I saw that. To see Michael Strahan get a sack in the Super Bowl, that made me really, really happy. But in any case, again, it's still 7-3. Then we go into the fourth quarter. And then all of a sudden we get that big catch and run from Big Boss Man, Kevin Boss. Gets us down close to scoring range, and then we just kind of get down there, and then Eli throws a pass to David Tyree, scores a touchdown, and the Giants go ahead 10-7 in the fourth quarter, and I'm like, oh my God, is it gonna happen? Is it gonna fucking happen? And they trade the ball a few more times, and one play that people forget about. Well, there's a couple things that people forget about. And one more thing I want to talk about in the third quarter. There was a point in the game where the defense stopped Brady, and it was a long field goal. It wasn't an easy one, but they were in kind of a long field goal range, and they opted to go for it on fourth down, and they missed it. And that was a huge play. And also the turnover where Justin Tuck and Osi Umenyiora forced a fumble and recovered it at the end of the half, which was also huge. But again, our defense played really, really well. I would argue the defense, like the front seven, were the real MVPs for the Giants of this game, but you can't give the MVP award to that full rotation. So I'm fine with Eli getting the MVP of this game because you got to give it to just one guy. But that was huge because I remember there were a lot of times throughout the regular season where the Patriots would go for it on fourth down when they had absolutely no reason to go for it on fourth down. It's like, dude, you're up by 40 points. Do you really need to throw on fourth down? It's like, and it was really rubbing people the wrong way. It's like, they're just out to humiliate people. This is ridiculous. And it did rub a lot of people the wrong way. But here, and my dad kept saying throughout the season, is like, that's going to bite them in the ass at some point. They're going to go for it on fourth down when they shouldn't, and it's going to bite them in the ass. And it did in this game because they went for it on fourth down instead of going for the field goal. And again, it wasn't a chip shot field goal, but it was it was a makeable one. Not a super long one, not a super short one, but it was makeable. But they opted to go for it, and they missed it. And they ended up losing the game by 3 points. And it was like, oh, going for it on fourth down. I bet you wish you had that one back, right? So it's funny. It's like my dad was right. He called it. It's like, it's hubris that is going to blow up in their face at some point. And it did. It was like, wow. Again, everything just kind of played out perfectly this season. It's kind of amazing. But anyway, the Giants take the lead, and then they trade the ball a couple more times. Patriots can't get in sync. Giants can't put the game away. And there's a play here where if the Giants had lost this game, if the Giants had not succeeded, I think this play would be talked about as one of the all-time great Super Bowl blunders. And what I mean is, there was a moment where Eli had Plaxico wide open, and he throws it to him, and he just overthrew him by a hair, and Plaxico couldn't complete the catch. And it was like there was no one around Plaxico. It's like if he catches that ball, it's a touchdown. Like, there's a 90% chance it's a touchdown and game over. It would have been game over at that point. So that would have been the Vorpal blade going snicker snack at the Jabberwocky. And it's like they missed that opportunity to really put the game away there. So if the Giants had lost this game, I think that's the play that would have stuck out to a lot of people as the huge missed opportunity to win the game. But anyway, the Patriots finally get in a rhythm. Typical late game heroics from Tom Brady. And then they get the go-ahead score. Corey Webster fell down in coverage. Randy Moss wide open in the end zone, touchdown. And that was like a dagger going right into my heart. It was that late in the game. It was like after all this, it's like they finally go down 14-10. And I was like, okay. I'm looking at it. And it's like, all right, there's 2.5 minutes left. I'm either going to see the Patriots win, which everybody expected, or I'm going to see the miracle of miracles, and I'm going to see the greatest moment in Giants history. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to watch it. No matter what happens, my team did me proud. I'm proud to be a fan right now, and they fought their hearts out tonight. So regardless of what happens, I'm proud of my team, but I'm going to watch it, and we're going to see what happens. If you've ever seen any of the NFL films highlight packages of this game, one of the more memorable clips is of Michael Strahan going up to the offense before taking the field for the final drive. 17-14 is the final, you guys. 17-14. One touchdown and we are world champions. Believe it and it will happen. And which is a great pep talk, but at the same time it's like, God, this is... again, everything just played out so perfectly. But anyway, so again, I was glued to the TV for the final drive of the Giants. I was like, all right, let's see if they can pull it off here and win the game. And there's a lot of close calls on that final drive. It was one of those, like, you know, you talk about like predestiny and luck or anything else. It's like, dude, there was a missed interception from Asante Samuel, which is funny because my mom argued, it's like, he wouldn't have come down in bounds with the ball even if he'd caught it. I'm like, I don't know about that. But but it was like, all right, we were fortunate that one didn't get picked off. And also, we had to have a 4th down conversion thanks to a 1-yard run from Brandon Jacobs. We had to have a bunch of stuff go our way. And not necessarily like lucky calls or anything like that, but just a bunch of things that were just crazy. And a lot of the first down conversions on that drive were coming on like 3rd down and 4th down, and it was just a nail biter all the way through. And obviously I'd be doing this talk about Super Bowl 42 a huge dishonor if I didn't talk about what is arguably the greatest play in Super Bowl history, the greatest catch in Super Bowl history. Manning to Tyree, 3rd and 5, and one of the greatest highlights in the history of the NFL, I would say. I don't know if it's the number 1 greatest. I think the Immaculate Reception probably tops the list in my eyes, but I'm a Giants fan and I'm also biased, and it's like Manning to Tyree really sticks out to me as one of the all-time greatest moments, because you have right now 3rd and 5. Eli looks like he's about to get sacked, and I'm like, oh no, not now, and he somehow fights his way out of it, gets away from the pressure, and throws the ball down the middle of the field, which looks like a fucking Hail Mary, and I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ. And then David Tyree comes out of nowhere with Rodney Harrison hanging all over him, jumps up, gets the ball, pins it to his helmet, and goes down to the ground, completing the catch and not letting the ball hit the ground. And immediately, I didn't even realize what had happened. I just knew he caught the ball. And I immediately started screaming at the TV, timeout, 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 call a timeout. Which Coughlin did, which is, if you've ever seen the highlight, he's like immediately calling a timeout afterwards. Because that was where we needed to like start reserving our time. And it wasn't until they showed the replay that I'd fully realized what had happened. And I was like, oh my God, that is incredible. And really, that play embodies that Giants team more than anything, because it's like, it ain't always pretty, it ain't always great, and you got to struggle to achieve it, but when you work hard and you put your maximum effort into what you're doing, great things can happen. And it created one of the greatest moments in the history of the Giants organization, in the history of the Super Bowl, and in the history of the NFL. It's a wonderful moment, but it wasn't over yet. People forget that we had another set of downs after that, and there's a third down play on that drive that people always forget about, but it was Steve Smith, a young rookie receiver who the next season kind of got a reputation for being our go-to third down receiver. It's like it became a thing amongst Giants fans, third and Smith. But this was probably the first example of that, where, again, game on the line, it's 3rd and 11, it's like, oh my God, here we go again. And Steve Smith gets the catch, kind of tiptoes up the sidelines, gets the first down, goes out of bounds, preserves the clock, and also gets us the first down. That was a huge, huge play from a rookie receiver, and I think helped us win the game. And I don't think that play gets enough credit because it's sandwiched between the greatest catch in the history of the Super Bowl and the play I'm about to talk about right now. So the very next play, New England blitzes. Eli recognizes it. They pick up the blitz, airs it out for the end zone, and Plaxico Burress is wide open for the winning touchdown. And the sheer exultation and joy I felt in that moment was unrivaled. I screamed, I jumped for joy. I made sure to look back at the TV, make sure there were no flags. It was a wonderful, wonderful, perfect moment as a Giants fan to take the lead with less than a minute to go in the Super Bowl over an undefeated team. I was like, oh my God, is this actually going to happen? Oh my God, I cannot believe that this is actually happening. And it was so, everything that had happened up to that point with all the struggles and all the doubters and everything, for Eli Manning to lead a drive at the end of that game to win, to score the go-ahead score in the Super Bowl was like, it felt like the ultimate vindication of everything that had happened that year and all the doubts and all the naysayers. It's like we have the lead in the Super Bowl with 35 seconds left to go. That is awesome. After all of this, it feels like the journey is actually going to go my way. But New England, 35 seconds to go with 3 timeouts and the greatest offense of all time with Tom Brady leading the charge. It's like, we're not out of the woods yet. It ain't over yet. And so I'm still in nail-biter mode. I'm like, oh God, what is going to happen here? And, you're kind of expecting the Patriots just kind of dink and duck down the field. It's like, please stop them. Do anything. Let anything happen. Please stop them. First play, it looks like Aaron Ross had a chance at an interception, but just couldn't get there. And I was like, oh God, that may have been, immediately I'm like, oh God, we may have missed our chance right there. Oh my God. Second play, Jay Alford, who I had never heard of up to that point, rookie player, never heard of the guy, gets a sack on Tom Brady in the Super Bowl, and it's like, there you go, a rookie player once again coming up big for the Giants in the biggest of situations. And I was like, oh my God, we just got a huge sack in the Super Bowl. And at that point, I started to feel like, okay, I think they've got this. 3rd and 20, I think we may have this. But then the next play, Brady airs it out for Randy Moss, and Corey Webster is the hero one last time and just tips the ball away from Randy Moss at the last second. I was like, oof, God, that would have been... And if that ball had been further ahead and more in like Randy Moss's hands and Corey wasn't able to get there, probably would have been a touchdown. It's just one of those like game of inches, man. It's all a game of inches. And here I am. It's like, all right, 4th and 20. It's like one more play and we're world champions. One more play and we're world champions. I was like, come on, guys. And sure enough, Brady airs it out. Doesn't get caught. And I knew at that moment, I was like, oh my God, the Giants just won the Super Bowl over an undefeated team. What the fuck is happening right now? It almost felt like something out of a fantasy world. Like, it was like, I couldn't have cooked this up any better if I'd made it up. It was just that perfect. Everything about it. And then you get the whole snafu at the end where everybody ran onto the field and Belichick ran onto the field and was accused of being a poor sport. I don't want to dwell on any of that, but it was like chaos after the game happened where it was like, did we just see what we think we saw? And even then, when the Giants took over on downs, we still had a second left on the clock that we had to have a play run. And I'm like, okay, guys, do not fuck up the kneel down. Because I don't know if the name Pasarchek is familiar to any of you, but it's a name that's quite well known in Giants lore for all the wrong reasons. But I was like, please don't fuck up the kneel down. Don't fuck up any of this. Just win the game and we'll be good to go. And of course, we got the kneel down and it was over. The Giants won what I feel is the greatest Super Bowl of all time. When you take into account, and I'm trying to remove my Giants fandom from this part of the analysis, but when I look back on the greatest Super Bowls of all time, when you look at what was on the line in this game, undefeated season against a Cinderella team that nobody believed in, one of the greatest upsets in the history of the game. I think this has got to be considered one of the greatest plays in the history of the game. One of the most iconic plays in the history of the game with the Manning to Tyree catch. This has got to be considered number one greatest Super Bowl of all time. If not number one, at least in the top 2 or 3 for a lot of people. Again, I'm biased because I'm a Giants fan. And it was a magical night all around, and it was crazy. I couldn't believe it. It was like I dreamt the whole thing. And I look back on it all the time, and it's like, man, I don't know. Like, the Giants could win 10 more Super Bowls. I don't think any of them will be as sweet as that one. Because again, of all the X factors going into it and everything that kind of worked together and combined together, to all these rookies stepping up and being really good for us, to the veterans like Michael Strahan and Amani Toomer and Jeff Fiegels finally getting their rings, to Eli Manning proving the doubters wrong and then finally stepping out of Peyton Manning's shadow and becoming a Super Bowl MVP caliber quarterback on his own. Everything about it was just perfect, and it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. The entire season was a wonderful experience. Through all the highs and lows, it was my favorite season in the history of the NFL, and it culminated with my favorite Super Bowl of all time. And just to show you how much I love this, I made a scrapbook. Now, I'm not going to subject you all to the full scrapbook, but I was so happy over this game. And the New York Post had so many great articles and pictures, and let's see if I can open this thing. Let me get that in the frame. So many great things here, and actually it was this cover that kind of inspired me to make the scrapbook. So many great moments and memories, and so many good stuff. Oh, and this is actually an autograph from Plaxico Burress, which I added to the scrapbook, which is really cool. There's the winning touchdown. This is the Manning to Tyree play. This is our defense just destroying Tom Brady. So many great things all around. So many great moments from all the players. There's a big article on Steve Smith, and so many great things. And we even have this is from the championship parade. All this stuff, yeah, and I believe I have the White House visit in there as well. Oh, there's that picture of Michael Strahan holding the trophy. Isn't that great? Yes, right here. Here's the White House visit with George W. Bush, George W. All that good stuff. There's the ring ceremony, pictures of them getting their rings. And it culminates with the announcement of Michael Strahan's retirement, which I felt was a good place to end on with the scrapbook. And for those of you wondering, yes, I also made a scrapbook for Super Bowl 46. I won't show that to you because I'm not really talking about that game here. But, hopefully that's an indicator that I would put that much effort into putting together a scrapbook to show us how much this game meant to me and how happy it made me on the day of and in the years that have followed. Those are all... Giants have had some crappy seasons the last couple of years, but I still, even with all that, I still feel blessed as a Giants fan. It's like, look, we had the greatest season of all time with the greatest Super Bowl of all time, the greatest victory in the history of the Super Bowl. So how upset can I be, really? So those are that is my most cherished Super Bowl memory, Super Bowl 42. So in the comments, please describe your favorite Super Bowl memories and moments and games, and why you like them, and which team is your favorite, and if they won the Super Bowl, explain which Super Bowl was your personal favorite and all that other stuff. I think it's a fun thing to talk about. I think when your team wins something and wins a championship, it's a really big deal, and it creates memories that stick with you forever, as obviously this has stuck with me forever. So, hopefully you all enjoyed this video. I'm going to be back to doing wrestling-related stuff soon, but for right now, I'm in full-on football mode. Let's bring on the Super Bowl. I'm excited for tomorrow's game, but that is all I have for you now. Thanks again, everybody, for watching, and I will see you all later.